Today, a federal appeals court heard arguments over whether President Trump had the power to deploy the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles amid protests on the ground. Just last week, a lower court ruled that Trump's move sending troops to L.A. was unlawful. That ruling is currently on hold as San Francisco's Court of Appeals takes up the question of Trump's authority. Joining me now is CBS News legal contributor and law school professor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, I can't seem to get that out today. What happened at the hearing today?
So exactly as you said, the judges were really looking at this question of whether under the statute, the president has the power to federalize the National Guard. And they're looking at that statute because it's the statute he pointed to in his executive order when he sought to do just that, to federalize the National Guard and send them to Los Angeles. And so the arguments were fascinating, a little weedy at times. But the first big question that they really asked was whether or not they could even second guess the president when it comes to whether or not the requisite facts, whether or not there is in fact a rebellion or a danger of a rebellion, or this is what they really focused on, whether the president was unable to execute federal law through the regular forces. That's the set of circumstances, the facts you need in order to say, yes, I'm going to federalize the National Guard. And they spent a good deal of time on, can we second guess? And if we can, how aggressively do we essentially defer, or can we really look under the hood?
Well, speaking of timing, how long do we think it will take for the court to issue its decision?
You know, what was really interesting is at the very end, Judge Bennett said, I understand that you have a hearing before Judge Breyer. That's the district court, the trial court judge on Friday, essentially, in my mind, signaling we'll get something to you before that hearing. Because what we're talking about right now is a temporary restraining order that Judge Breyer issued. The next step is whether or not he would issue a preliminary injunction. And that is set for Friday. I think the Ninth Circuit is absolutely mindful of that, and they're going to give some guidance before then.
What are the potential ramifications of this decision, and what sort of precedent could it set?
It's a really important question. I think a couple of things to remember. One, we're at the initial stages here. We're talking about a temporary restraining order and whether or not that should be paused. But two, I do think it's important to focus on the fact that this is about one statute. It's about Title 10, Section 12406. It's not a grand theory of the Constitution and the power of the presidency versus the power of states. So yes, it will tell us about the president's power under these circumstances, which is important, but I think no more and no less than that.
And Jessica, do you think this question will eventually reach the Supreme Court?
It could reach the Supreme Court. Reading the tea leaves of today, I think it's possible that we see a 3-0 decision in favor of President Trump, which would obviously mean that California would be the losing party, and California could seek emergency relief in the Supreme Court. That's something that's increasingly happening, as you know, where the losing party is going directly to the Supreme Court and saying, we need you to look at this right now. That's somewhat unusual at this stage of a case, but I think it's possible.
Always appreciate your legal perspective. Jessica Levinson, thank you.